Meet Reed Lance Rosenthal, rancher, #1 best-selling, award-winning author, and unabashedly, unapologetically on the right side of the outstanding issues of our generation. But don't try to fence him in. Sometimes his positions will surprise you, because Reed is definitely his own man, with his own opinions. You might love him, you might hate him, but you won't be able to stop listening. Step over to the right side with Reed.
Howdy, listeners and viewers, coast to coast, the Gulf to Canada, and around the globe. This is Reed Lance Rosenthal on the Right Side Radio and the Cowboys Take on all those video channels. Please hit subscribe. Hit the little bell. That'll tell you when a new video comes out, because I'm not really on a set schedule. As I have time and as information comes, I'm bringing them out. I'm shooting for 2 a week. This is the second this week, although 6 days apart. And that little bell, once you subscribe, will tell you when something's out, so you don't have to waste time looking to see if something's out. You can also see things or listen to things on OnTheRightSideRadio.com. The audio bar is right there. You don't get to see my smiling, ugly maw, but, you know, that might work for some people. We don't know. So today, I'm going to bring you some brain teasers. How's that? Because I think there's a much, much, much bigger game going on. And it's not really a game, it's a war. Then we are being led to believe, we are being diverted from thinking about. But I'm going to give you a series of dots about what I think is really happening with Russia, China, and the United States. And to a lesser extent over there in the Mideast, which is kind of a distraction, a purposeful distraction right now. And what's happening with the United States and the Western quote-unquote allies, the backstabbers over there in Europe, in concert with the BRICS. Because I think there's huge, huge things afoot that are going to stun 99.99% of the people on the planet, never mind here in the United States. Before I get into that, because that's going to be kind of a foundation for a number of upcoming shows over the next month, including, I hope, 1 or 2 interviews with folks who are far more knowledgeable and have been watching this for a far longer time than I. I'm going to bring you just some of the new things that have been uncovered by Doge. Breathtaking. I'll just leave it at that. It's breathtaking. And some of the lawfare tactics being employed by the left, along with corrupt judges, most of them appointed by Obama. Must be a coincidence, huh? So I'm going to give you a little backdrop on current events, what's going on. This whole show is really about corruption, #1, and #2, how that has led and is part of, we'll call it the Great Reset. But I think the Great Reset is far bigger than we've been discussing, far bigger than you've been thinking, far larger than what you've been hearing in other places and other channels. And remember, all the articles and a number of the interviews and speeches that I'm going to reference are on the website under the various categories, or if really important, under the audio bar. Remember, I do not bring you news or thoughts without receipts, folks. Everything I tell you is backed, black and white or on video, on the website with that show, and you can go back in the archives and see them all on therightsideradio.com. So first of all, let's start off with the founder's quote, in keeping with today's show, I might add. Corruption is another invincible enemy of freedom. Yes, that's George Washington. Another one from George Washington. The only way to keep our liberties is to guard against corruption, unquote. And here's a doozy from George Washington. Corruption, like a cancer, eats faster and faster every hour. The revenue creates pensioners, and the pensioners urge for more revenue. Does this sound familiar? The people grow less steady, spirited, and virtuous. The seekers more numerous and more corrupt. and every day increases the circles of their dependence and expectants until virtue, integrity, public spirit, simplicity, and frugality become the objects of ridicule and scorn. Do you see what's happening with the left, the press, and the courts right now? And vanity, luxury, foppery, selfishness, meanness, and downright venality swallow up the whole society. That was actually John Adams, not George Washington, but a powerful quote, and boy, right on. You can see it playing out before your very eyes, minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day, right now. Right now. All right, so the Founding Fathers, let's start off with a little history here on this corruption part of the show. Benjamin Franklin, James Madison, Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, Alexander Hamilton were really the five founders, although they were all concerned, who beat the drums on corruption, how to set up a system that would be transparent, that the people could watch, that the press could monitor, of course. When the press is being paid off by the system, it doesn't monitor much. Wait till we get to that part of this show. And those folks, the checks and balances in government were not just about freedoms and liberties. They were about transparency and corruption. One branch of the government watching over another branch. Of course, when they're acting in collusion, that doesn't work too well, does it? So, Benjamin Franklin believed that corruption undermined the principles of fairness and justice, and therefore a just and equitable society. And he understood, as did the rest of the founders, that when those in power prioritize personal gain or power over the welfare of the people or the edicts of the Constitution, it results in a breakdown of social order, erosion of the common good, and faith in the institutions of the Republic, which of course is kind of a side tangent of these ideologues who are lining their own pockets, right? Our friend Barack Obama, yes, and his minions, who are still, unfortunately, although it looks like not for long, entrenched deeply in many of these bureaucratic rat holes where this corruption and cancer is growing and dissipating throughout the land and throughout the world, as a matter of fact. Wait till I get to you about some people who've been running this later here in this show. So Benjamin Franklin, of course, was one of the founders who is most conversant with this. Why? Because he spent decades in Europe. He was like the official United States emissary to Great Britain up until the time they kicked him out as the Revolutionary War was breaking out. And he saw the corruption, he saw the games, he saw the mutual pats on the backs and the exchange of pounds sterling over there, dollars over here. And he understood what it did to a government, what it did to a people, and what it did, in fact, to an empire. One of his great quotes, we're actually going to have a number of quotes here, is when the people find they can vote themselves money, that will herald the end of the republic. Yes, a well-known quote. Thomas Jefferson, corruption is the enemy of revolution and the friend of tyranny. Absolutely. Now, Jefferson was the founder that beat the drums hardest on transparency and the checks and balances between various parts of the government. In other words, not only would the people be able to see what type of corruption and what was happening in government, including through the press. I mean, at that time, the founders figured the press would be honest. Imagine that. But also through the various checks and balances between the various branches of government, which, of course, the corrupt judges and corrupt media right now are trying to disassociate from the Trump administration. Can you imagine the CEO of a company who is not allowed to look at the company's books? Just to put it in kind of a metaphorical phrase. And I don't care whether it's a company big or small. I mean, you can't imagine. Well, that's the tact the left is trying to take, because They're scared about what's being found and what's going to be found. Remember, Doge is just getting started, folks. I mean, it's in its infancy. There's a lot more nastiness coming. One of the main areas of corruption back there in the Revolutionary War, the time period of the founders, was bribery. And that seems to be going on, but, filtered through all sorts of shell corporations and kickbacks and circuitous routes and Cayman Island accounts right now. I mean, the bribery has exponentially grown. It's just gotten more sophisticated in trying to cover its tracks. But in the end, there's no covering the tracks of the flow of money, right? Just follow the money. Another form of corruption that was prevalent through the revolutionary times was political favoritism. Now, we have all seen that up close and personal over the past 8 years since 2016, actually 2015, the year before Trump was elected for the first time. And we've seen it, folks, for decades. It just hasn't been in our face like it has been the last 10 or so years. James Madison, he also viewed corruption as a serious threat to the integrity of government. And he also, along with Madison, along with Jefferson, advocated for checks and balances, which would not only check and balance freedom and law and the equal application of law, but the flow of money, who was getting it, who was getting paid, why they were getting paid, how much they were getting paid. Which, by the way, Doge is kind of uncovering at breakneck pace right now. All of the founding fathers, very important, believed in education for the people and civic virtue. They emphasize the powers and the importance, the foundational importance to a republic of an educated populace and a populace that was informed and a populace that had some sense of moral values. That would not only shape the individual's behavior and sense of civic duty, but would also flow through, down, or up, however you want to look at it, to government and the bureaucrats in government. Yeah, there were bureaucrats back then too, just a hell of a lot less of them, at a lot less money. Transparency and accountability. The founders absolutely believed in a transparent government, transparent expenditures, and accountability if something went wrong, there was a mistake made, or there was intentional corruption or treason. And a number of people, shall we say, met an unfortunate end when they were caught back in those days. Oh, bring back those days. So we have all these things going on back then. And now we have all those things going on right now. Much to the screams, the hues, and the cries of the perpetrators of the fraud, the corruption, and the treason. You know, all you have to do, folks, is look at who's yelling the loudest. Pretty much 100% of the time, that will tell you who's the guiltiest, who's taken the most, who has ransacked the system at their personal pleasure more than anyone else, and there's a lot of players ransacking the system. Madison believed that corruption, to go to another founder, Madison believed that corruption stems from an abuse of power. Absolutely, we're seeing that. And a lack of transparency, once again, absolutely. And you know, Doge is completely transparent. Not only are they posting continuously on X and elsewhere as to what they're doing, what department they're in, what they're finding, they have a whole website set up. You can go to the website, see exactly what they're looking at, exactly what they found, the people involved, the whole 9 yards. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the legality of Doge here, which the left and the perpetrators of the fraud, the corruption, the treason are, shall we say, protesting loudly. Yes, protesting loudly. And Madison also believed, along with the rest of the founders, that an informed and educated citizenry was crucial, absolutely tantamount in the war against corruption. That might explain, don't you think, since everything is connected, why the education system in the United States has been purposely dumbed down for the last 20 years. Overfunded, by the way, much of that money going to more graft and corruption. Boy, wait till we get into the Department of Education. Everything is interrelated, folks. If you have a dumbed down populace, you have a paid off press, and you have a secretive bureaucracy, along with a corrupted partial judiciary. For instance, the Obama judge that ruled that the Secretary of the Treasury, I'm not making this up, was not allowed to go into the Treasury's books. He's since reversed that portion of his ruling after a hue and cry, and after articles of impeachment were invoked in Congress to impeach his sorry ass. But that will give you an idea. Another judge has been shown to be a mega Democratic donor. His rulings have been equally obtuse and, shall we say, out of touch with reality and the Constitution. I mean, this is all one big shell game. This is everybody trying to protect everybody's butt. Except that, you know, when the ship starts sinking, rats like those start eating the other rats. This is going to get really interesting. And I think a lot of people are going to go to jail because Doge, just as the other day, was given the power to bring criminal referrals. And as we all know, Pam Bondi is chomping at the bit. In fact, she's already rocking and rolling on criminal referrals. And Kash Patel, when our senators who decided to go to Germany rather than vote on his confirmation, I mean, really? Seriously? When Kash Patel is hopefully confirmed here in the next few days, and the FBI is weeded out and focused on its core mission and its core oath, which is to the Constitution, I think you're going to see all sorts of fur flying. My only hope, to be quite honest with you, is that capital punishment is invoked for the most treasonous of the offenders. Because part of the prosecution of graft, crime, corruption, and treason is to set an example so that others who would be tempted otherwise do not go down that dark path to the detriment of the Republic and the citizens of the Republic, not to mention the Constitution. Madison, by the way, also believed very highly. He was the foremost founder who believed in free press, which, as you'll see later in the show, has been anything but a free press. In fact, it's been a paid press, the opposite of free press, depending on how you use the vernacular. I digressed a little bit and didn't give you the ranch story up front. That was purposeful, believe it or not, because the ranch story really kind of ties into everything I'm bringing you today. And our ranch story this week, to interject a bit of smile into an otherwise somber presentation, is the other day with this vapid cold descending on the mountains of Wyoming. I mean, 10 below, 20 below, 30-mile-an-hour wind. I mean, cold doesn't bother me, but it was cold and it was damp, which makes it twice as cold. You folks know what I mean. And we had everything prepared, as I told you in the last show in that ranch story. And we took up one of the bales, all netted up, ready to go. We munched on by the ponies up there and a bucket of minerals and figured they were good to go. And we had several more bales loaded so we could keep feeding through the cold spell, which, by the way, has dissipated for just a single day and is now about to get cold again. And we went up there the other day, actually yesterday, to see how much hay was left. And to our amazement, they hadn't touched it. They were out there munching contentedly on the remainings of the pastures, the spring and summer hay pastures. And obviously they had enough food, and obviously it wasn't quite cold enough to stimulate that caloric intake need. And they hadn't touched the bale. So, in line with the show today, where we are bringing We are bringing information about a whole bunch of people who are learning a whole bunch of nasty things and don't want to see it, or are trying to cover it up to cover their behinds or the behinds of their friends, the collective nest of rats. The motto of this story, and our amazement that the bail had not been touched, despite incredible weather, is, and it's a little play on words, folks, you can lead a horse to hay, but you can't make him eat. That's right. So we shall see if we can make the bureaucrats eat the hay, shall we? Even if we have to force feed them. All right. So let me tell you a little bit about what's going on in the Doge discoveries, which are, I could spend 5 shows going over this stuff. Go to their website. Perhaps the producers will put a link up on the radio website on the rightsideradio.com, but if not, easy to find. And you can see the zillion other things they're finding in numerous other places. And remember, they're just getting started, as I told you before. So here's what's come to light here just in the last few days. And by the way, they're kind of trickling this out because I think they know lots more than they are letting on. They just don't want to lose the impact. You know, it's kind of the Project Veritas theory. Trickle it out. Make them swing. Let the information permeate before you bring the next raft of information. Save some information to bury them with when they fabricate their squawks and their creaks of protest. All right, so in Haiti, which of course, the Clinton Foundation, right? Just a little bit of corruption there. 1.14 billion was spent by the United States to build a port and power plant project. It was promoted, by the way, by Bill Clinton. And yes, the Clinton Foundation was involved on the sides. Nothing ever got built. Let me underline that. Nothing. 1.14 billion, nothing ever got built. Cuba. In 2006, there was 74 million spent in democracy promotion. Oh, I'm sure Fidel Castro let that go, right? I'm sure that worked. you bet. All the funds vanished. The program was never instituted. The money's gone, no program. Imagine that. Afghanistan. Tens upon tens of millions of dollars to contractors or local Taliban, or should we say America installed, temporary before the Taliban, ministers and mayors and whatever have you over there, whatever they call themselves. Tens of millions to build hospitals. No hospitals were ever built. Money's gone. Nigeria. There's a company called Chemonomics. It's a major USAID contractor. Oh, well, I can't wait to get into their books. 40 million in taxpayer money was funded, they were linked to a subcontractor overbilling scandal. Oh, imagine that. Subcontractors overbilling the United States government. Hundreds of millions gone. No projects. COVID-19 funding. USAID, right? This all ties in Fauci and the whole 9 yards. You're wondering about Biden's pardons, preemptive, illegal pardons. USAID spent $40 million in our taxpayer money, our money, with a scientist located in Wuhan to work on gain-of-function mutations for SARS-CoV-2, COVID. You think there's a little treason there, folks? That might be one of those cottonwood trees and rope deals, including Mr. Fauci. 2.5 million went to DEI programs in Serbia, in Europe. 2.5 million. $70,000 went to a DEI musical in Ireland. $47,000 went to transgender operas in Colombia. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Iraq, 20 million for an Iraqi version of Sesame Street, which just happened to heavily promote, like in every episode throughout the episode, LGBTQ agendas. That I'm sure went over big in a Muslim country, right? That we're trying to win friends and influence people. Perfect. Egypt and Tunisia, 56 million of our tax money for their tourism, quote unquote tourism. Somehow they can't find the programs and they can't see any impact on tourism, or if there was an impact on tourism, any beneficial impact to the United States. Vietnam, 11 million to fight trash burning. I wish I was making this up. I'm really not. Central America, 27 million for deportee gift bags. Yeah, a gift bag for the poor deportees headed on their ways to the United States and the open borders. Right. Trump lawfare. You want to know where some of the funding came from for all the lawfare and the unequal application of law against Trump and others, Rudy Giuliani, etc.? 27 million went in one way, shape, or form to the left-wing prosecutors and prosecutions of political opponents around the globe, by the way. And that includes Donald Trump. Patently illegal, treason, hanging offense. And guys, tip of the iceberg. A little part of that iceberg that we don't have time to fully delve into is how the press, which we know is corrupt, was aided in its descent into corruption hell. I told you before about Politico, and you've probably heard it on the news. They've now narrowed that down. Okay, 34.3 million went to Politico, left-wing rag digital outlet, from various government agencies. I bet you they're going to find more. In other words, they knew they were doing something wrong, so they spread it out so it couldn't be seen. And that money was spent primarily after Politico laundered the Biden campaign Hunter laptop disinformation. Little quid pro quo in the corruption and treason trials coming up? I think so. The New York Times, all the news that's fit to print. The voice of America, folks. $50 million, once again, from a number of government sources, including $26.9 million from Health and Human Services. Do I need to say COVID? Do I need to say jab? The Associated Press, the AP, $19.5 million in government contracts and $619,000 and change in grants from the Department of State, with funding spikes, by the way, heavily concentrated in election years of 2020 and 2024. Just coincidence, I'm sure. Reuters news agency. So Reuters got $9 million from the Department of Defense, the DOD, the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Gagme Austin, prior to Hegseth, for active $9 million for active social engineering, defense, and large-scale social deception. Let me repeat that. This is right in the pay document. And you don't think you're getting hoodwinked, huh? Active social engineering, defense, and large-scale social deception, unquote. Okay. The BBC, this is over in England. We're going to be talking about England. England plays a big role in what I think is actually really happening on a global, universal scale right now. The last part of the show coming up. The British government TV gets $3.3 million from U.S. taxpayers, and then gets another $20 million from Bill Gates. Hmm. Do you think the globalists are in league with the legions of treasonous folks here in the bureaucracy, the treasonous ideologues, promoting their ideology and lining the pockets of themselves and their friends as they do it? Mm-hmm. So this might explain why all the reporting, which we always wonder about, sounds the same, how everybody has the same talking points. You know, oh, the death of democracy, or, you know, Orange Man bet, whatever it happens to be. Well, they're all getting their money from the same place. So that same place is telling them what to say. And like dutiful little slaves to the treasonous, corrupt flow of dollars, they do as they are bid. And that's why the media, the legacy media folks, is done. They're getting more done every day. Couldn't happen to a nicer bunch. And then we have $100 billion that they're just now getting into, the Doge team, stolen from U.S. taxpayers through Medicare and Medicaid. $100 billion. That's 1/10 of a trillion, folks. It was siphoned from the American people. It was funneled through a system carefully designed to cover tracks. That was not, it had nothing to do with healthcare. It was fueling covert operations of the CIA, more deep state nonsense, line the pockets of corrupt and treasonous elites, and sustain an agenda that was never meant to be uncovered. This is your health dollars. You know, all the lefties screaming and yelling about Medicare. Even here in Wyoming, you know, there's the sob story about, gee, the state should get on Medicaid, you know, for its people. The state shouldn't touch Medicaid. The less you have to do with the federal government and the federal bureaucracy, the better. The smaller the federal government and the federal bureaucracy, the better. The more transparent, paramount importance. Paramount importance. Medicare, I was just talking about Medicaid. Medicare serves 68 million Americans. Medicaid, by the way, 73 million Americans. That's almost half the population, folks. So 1 in 4 citizens in Medicare are trapped in a system that is designed for one thing: to fund covert and overt operations that the American people don't want, that they didn't vote for, that are illegal and treasonous and fraudulent, and the other for covert operations to promote the ideology of the neocons and the warmongers and better the military industrial inflow of funds from selling the weapons of war. I mean, this is what's being uncovered is truly incredible. Incredible. There were 850 agents and brokers in Medicare suspended over the last year. This is by a corrupt administration. I mean, it was so bad they had to do something or have some sacrificial lambs. They were suspended for unauthorized enrollments in the plan, for plan switches, for overfunding, for fabrication of bills. I can go on and on and on and on. This isn't just fraud, okay? Since 2007, there's been 5,400 defendants charged, 27 billion stolen. Still, the looting hasn't stopped. You know why? Because there hasn't been ultimate punishment. No examples have been set. No shots of other people dangling in the wind from a cottonwood tree fired across the boughs of would-be future or current perpetrators. And by the way, the missing 100 billion I was talking about, that's now been tracked by the Doge algorithms into black ops funding, financing CIA shadow programs, experimental weapon development, covert global influence campaigns, university influence campaigns. I mean, this is wow. I'll just say simply wow. And folks, I'm not touching it. I'm not touching it. This isn't even the highlights. This is just a sample, okay? And then we get into the personal corruption, which is now being uncovered. And this kind of ties in with Doge's newfound ability to issue criminal referrals, and Pam Bondi, rabid dog of a great attorney she is, chomping at the bit. And all the uproar over Kash Patel taking over the FBI, because to prosecute, the crime has to be found. The FBI has to investigate and put together the evidence. The evidence has to go to DOJ, Pam Bondi, so she can bring a concrete case and obtain a conviction. It takes three elements. Why do you think all the hue and cry from the deep state boys, the rhinos, and the Democrats up there on Capitol Hill about the confirmation of Kash Patel and the confirmation of Pam Bondi, and et cetera, et cetera? It's all tied in, right? USAID, Samantha Powers, Obama disciple, key Obama appointee to several big positions back in Obama's time, and now it appears in Obama's third term through cadaver. She was running USAID. Apparently, when she went into USAID, her net worth was under $1 million, somewhere around 700,000 or 800,000. It's irrelevant what the exact number was. Her salary was about 180,000 a year. 2 years later, she has a reported net worth of approximately $31 million. What possibly could have happened there? And then we have Victoria Nuland, you know, the neocon who crowed about the 2014 color revolution in Ukraine, which has led to the current war, the death of millions, and the expenditure of over almost $500 billion by Europe and the United States, mostly the United States, of your tax money. Not to mention putting the world on edge, driving Russia into the arms of China, and a whole bunch of other things we're going to talk about in just a moment. Victoria Nuland didn't just depart the foreign policy scene like we were led to believe. She happens to run the Institute for Democracy, another little government kind of USAID type, you know, side agency, a money funneler. And it seems her net worth has rapidly increased over the last year or two also. Such a coincidental wealth increase. You know, as an aside, Barry Obama, when he was elected president, had a net worth of under $1 million. His net worth, although nobody really knows it, is now estimated to be at over $100 million. And of course, he has his multi-million-dollar palatial estates in Cape Cod and Washington, D.C., where he could run the government in his third term with cadaver trying to form words out there on the podium, if he could reach it and didn't fall over. Ron Paul is going to be brought on by Doge to audit the Fed. It's about time. Maybe audit our gold reserves too, that nobody has audited since 1953. 1953, folks. Yeah. That all ties into the bigger picture thoughts I'm going to be bringing you and elaborating on pretty extensively over the next month, along with, I hope, some interviews. The CFBP, the Consumer Fraud Protection Bureau, an Elizabeth Warren concoction. And boy, is she screaming and yelling about what Doge and Trump are doing with the CFB, which is basically dismantling it and looking at its books and records. I wonder what we're going to find. You know, her net worth has mysteriously increased rather rapidly and voluminously since she was elected as a senator by the great but unthinking people in Massachusetts. And if you're in Massachusetts, you know what I mean, folks. Okay, what they found so far in CFBP is that it was used as a political weapon against opponents of either policy or the government. That's right. And Elizabeth Warren was involved up to her eyeballs in what they did or did not do at the CFPBC. So it seems that you would be targeted for XYZ made up activity. And they would tell you that it's going to cost you tens of millions of dollars to fight us in court. And we're going to fine you another, millions and millions and millions of dollars. Or I'll tell you what, we can do a plea agreement, quote unquote, plea agreement, if you wish. And if you give X amount of money, lots, to either these causes or to these Democratic candidates or to these Democratic, these Dem political action committees, we'll just forget about this case. That's right. You got it. Kind of similar to what's been uncovered over on the NGO side, Department of Homeland Security and other departments. Money went to NGOs, and then the NGOs turned around and made political contributions to the Dems, all highly illegal, and I would argue treasonous. What's really interesting is that despite their squawks and their protestations and their denials, Saul Alinsky's Handbook for Radicals, deny, 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 divert, divert, divert. It seems that the Google search for criminal defense attorneys is now many multiples higher in the Washington, D.C. area than in any other location in the United States of America or the world. And it has increased just in the last 10 days by 3x. You think there's some people maybe getting worried? Good. Terrific. And the New York Times, who got that $50 million from you to bring you the truth, all the news that's fit to print. They're now running editorials trying to CYA, saying that, remember, they started off with there is no corruption, Doge is wrong, they're unqualified, blah, 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 blah. They're totally surprised by this proven corruption and treason. Totally surprised. Had no idea as they pocket the $50 million as part of the treasonous consortium, right? Unbelievable. Doge and Trump have gotten other things done, okay? Particularly Trump. He signed a bill, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about this if we have time today. He's cut off all funding for universities and schools that mandate COVID vaccines. It's about damn time. There's a whole movement now, all sorts of articles coming out about outlawing mRNA vaccines, although they're now pending approval to give it to all poultry, for the avian bird flu. Man, I might never eat chicken again because if you don't get the jab, you don't need to eat the chicken that got the jab, if you know what I mean. And he also established the Energy Dominance Commission, which has to do with LNG exports, getting ANWR open, which Biden closed down, the Keystone Pipeline going, which Biden closed down, the Gulf of Mexico, which Biden closed. 600 billion acres that Biden, Obama's third term, and the globalists closed down to energy exploration and development. They're working hard to get that open. As part of it, like subsets, they're revoking all these appliances, like, stoves, refrigerators, and all that kind of stuff. All these appliances on which Biden and his minions, Obama's third term, put restrictions. Like they're trying to outlaw gas dryers. They're trying to outlaw, gas this, gas that. Yeah. All that's getting reversed. Good for them. In the end, that will mean lots of money saved and therefore in the pocket of Americans and a more vibrant American economy, America first. So we have lawfare going on, right? No big surprise. But this lawfare is against Doge and Musk and Trump and all the steps that they are taking, which are mandated by the Constitution, mandated in the separation of powers. One of the lawsuits says that Doge is not a government agency. It has to be approved by Congress and blah, 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 blah. They're wrong. Doge is actually the Digital Services Department, or the Digital Watchdog, should we say, Department of the United States. They simply changed the name. It's an existing department. So once again, the left is making stuff up, throwing it at the wall in front of a liberal, usually appointed by Obama judge, and seeing if it will stick and how long it will stick, because anything they can do to delay Trump by even a day gives them some measure of time to try and collect their thoughts, because right now they are under carpet bombing by the Trump administration, and good for the Trump administration. There's been a bevy of judges, all left-wing except for one, to which these lawsuits have been brought. In other words, you're cherry-picking the courts. They're trying to stop the funding cuts. No access, even by the Treasury Secretary, to the Treasury, to the Department of Treasury records. Really amazing. The buyout was stopped, the buyout of federal employees that was offered, which really actually is a great buyout offer. And then green lighted after there was a hue and cry, and after impeachment articles against one of these judges started circulating in the House. Now, there's only been impeachment brought against 15 judges in the history of the United States. Only 8 of them were actually impeached, so don't hold your breath, but it does send a warning shot. USAID employees have brought a lawsuit saying that Musk can't fire them, that they can't be fired. I'm not making this up, man. And of course, they're backed and financed by the 800,000 member strong Federal Employees Union. I talked about them and their corruption and their treason in the last show. The Department of Education, I mean, it's only begun to be dismantled, and the left is up in arms because they don't want an intelligent population, folks. Remember what we were talking about just a few minutes ago. They want a dumbed down population, spoon-fed by a paid-off press, so they can continue to perpetrate their anti-constitutional horrors, graft, and corruption. And then 40% of the bureaucrats, there was a poll that was done. I don't know how it was done or by who it was done. I've read 2 articles on it from 2 different sources. There was a poll done of the bureaucrats in Washington. And it seems that 40% of the respondents said that they will not do, divert, detract, refuse, or subvert the edicts of the Trump administration. So that kind of tells you how much we can cut the federal workforce by, at least 40%. See ya. And I can't wait for Doge to really dig into the Department of Health and Human Services and Mayorkas, because I have a feeling he's dirty as hell. Dirty as hell. And I think a lot of his money came from foreign sources, never mind domestic fraud. All right, so that's where we are at on the Doge rampage, and go Elon, go. Go Elon, go. Go Vivek, go. Now, let's talk about the big picture here. And I'm going to make this brief because I want to give you some brain ticklers. Let me give you some dots. Several months ago, I brought you a show about Canada, the actual legal documents that exist. I have the video posted on the website. You can see it all, see all the documents. I mean, it's really well done. Proof, legal proof, that each province of Canada is not now part of the Canadian government. That Canada really doesn't, quote unquote, exist as a nation, and certainly not as a principality of the British Crown, but that each province in Canada is a separate, sovereign, independent state, country, if you will. Number 2, you've heard whispers and talks about the strings that London pulls over the U.S. and global financial markets. You are now seeing the repatriation, the movement of gold, silver, and other assets like them away from the London Gold Exchange and the Bank of England, creating quite a crisis. We'll talk about a little bit more about that in a moment. You are seeing, and you saw what happened with Brexit, where the English government and London pulled out every stop in the book to try and not have that Brexit vote, and now to try and redo that Brexit vote, and the screams and wails from the European Union over that vote. Here's the bottom line. The British lost the Revolutionary War. They tried again in 1812. Andrew Jackson defeated them at that cataclysmic battle in New Orleans, and they lost again, and they retreated. They retreated at least militarily and the use of force, but they never retreated from economic strings. They never retreated from geopolitical strings. And they've been pulling the strings of the globalists and the corrupt bureaucrats in Washington for a long, decades and decades and decades and decades. Let's think back. I'm going to bring you history over the next 3 or 4 months, much more detailed history. Let's think back to Yalta, the conference at Yalta. Stalin from Russia, Churchill from Britain, Roosevelt from the United States. What did they do? They did the same thing that a similar type of commission, if you will, did in World War I. They carved up the lands of the earth. This is your sphere of influence. This is your sphere of influence. And this is your sphere of influence. Think about that. It happened in World War I, and then it happened in World War II. 3, at that time, superpowers. Britain much declined and much crippled by the wars, but the others, superpowers. The United States predominant. And think about what happened with Henry Kissinger when the petrodollar deal was made. Not too long afterwards, 25 years, 20 years or so, which pegged the US dollar as the currency of the world and as the currency denomination in which oil, energy, the lifeblood of the globe, folks, the lifeblood of economy, the lifeblood of heat, the lifeblood of... nothing works without energy. 90% of the items that are manufactured could not be manufactured without energy, and in many cases, the input of actual derivatives of crude oil into the manufacture of the product itself. And then we have the Ukraine war, right? This is Europe goading the United States, led by London and Britain, into the war with Russia in the Ukraine, a war which Victoria Nuland and Barack Obama and the rest of the globalists set in motion with the color revolution funded by all these agencies covertly using your tax dollars in 2014. Let's go one more, okay? So gold and silver is now being sucked out of, by the United States, is being sucked out of Asia, Eurasia, London, from all over the world. Somewhere between 400 and 1,000 tons of gold have been moved just in the last 2 weeks to New York. And thousands of tons of silver has likewise been moved. The result is that all these markets are running low on actual physical inventory of precious and other metals. Delivery times by London, which is supposed to be within 48 hours of somebody saying, I want gold for my contract or I want gold for my note, has now been stretched to 8 weeks. Korea and some of the Asian countries have stopped, absolutely stopped, sending out any gold bars whatsoever just in the last few days. No inventory. At the same time, the Chinese, there's no coincidences, folks, have told their insurance companies you can now have gold as a reserve currency. And they've exhorted their population to buy gold, because it's better than our failing real estate market over here in China. And the real estate market is a mess. And then you have Russia just, 2 months ago, 3 months ago, saying they were going to start buying silver as a metals reserve in addition to the gold they've been buying. Think about all these things. Now, add into the equation another dot. The new Secretary of the Treasury, the guy that isn't allowed into his department's own books, Bessel. He has said in interviews, if you go back, you can find them on the web, that his primary asset is gold. He's a believer in gold. At a recent reporter fest, if you will, press conference at the White House, which, by the way, is posted on the website under the audio bar, several of the high mucky-mucks, including Bessel, were there along with Trump. And Bessel made a really interesting comment. I replayed it 3 times. He said, it is time to monetize the assets of the United States. What assets do we have, folks? We have energy, number 1. Gold, number 2. Land, number 3. Those are the basic assets of the United States. And of course, buildings that are 12% occupied, for which we're paying $14 billion, as I told you last week. At the same time, you have to know, and they know, that the current debt of the United States, I'm not even talking about the unfunded liabilities, right? Backed by the full faith and credit of the United States, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, etc., cannot be repaid, folks. There was a new study that just came out. I didn't get time to get into some of the economic statistics that have come out in the last week. Inflation is up, 5th month in a row, up over rates 2 years ago in 23. Retail sales plummeted 0.9% in January, which of course the New York Times, getting its 50 million, and the rest of the corrupt goops in the mainstream media is saying, just a temporary aberration, I mean, people spent a lot during Christmas and now they're just kind of recouping. No, I don't think so. There's a study now out, and I believe it will be posted on the website under Economy and Rat-a-tat-tat. We are now at the point where our debt is so large that it takes $1.40 in debt, an increase of $1.40 in debt, to stimulate a $1 increase in GDP. The only possible way on a strictly production level that we're going to get ourselves out of the debt is to dramatically grow GDP at a rate far faster than debt, which obviously is exactly the opposite of what is occurring. So I think that all these people are smart enough. They're all billionaires. They're not dummies. All these people are smart enough to know that there's no way out for the United States and the West. We'll get into the West here in a moment, except to revalue some of these assets. About 2 years ago, I brought you a number of shows and I talked about how easy it would be to stabilize the United States currency, and how easy it would be to put together a viable alternative to what the BRICS were putting together, gold-backed international currency. And that was simply to take a portion of our natural gas reserves. We have 300 years of reserve. We're the Saudi Arabia of natural gas. And to monetize 100 years of that and make it an asset backing Treasury securities along with our gold reserves and perhaps other assets. Well, this Energy Commission I told you about a few minutes ago, one of their missions, it seems, is to get natural gas rock and rolling, pipelines rocking and rolling, and LNG export ports reopened that Biden closed or stopped in the middle of construction to export gas to the rest of the world. Just another little dot. There's a guy by the name of Jim Rickards. Some of you, I'm sure, have listened to him. He's a former CIA. He's been advisor to the government and other high mucky mucks. And he did a calculation. This is 3 or 4 months ago, actually. But if, assuming that we have the gold we say we do, we say we have 8,300 tons at Fort Knox, hasn't been audited since 1953, we shall see. And of course, we have what suddenly we're bringing back across the channel, pretending that it's being brought across the ocean. It's being brought back because of tariffs or because there's an arbitrage play. You can, buy for less and sell for more, buy for less in London, sell for more in New York, and all sorts of other lame excuses, which the media lapdogs are lapping up, of course. I don't think it's that at all. I don't think it's that at all. I think there is a grand plan afoot, and it involves the BRICS, and it involves Russia, and it involves China. It involves gold. It involves these other natural assets of the United States and perhaps of other countries. And it involves the history we learned at Bretton Woods and Yalta and back there in World War I. Versailles was the name of that treaty, the Versailles Treaty. History repeats, folks. There's a lesson in history. And I think you are going to see, once again, just thought teasers. I think you are going to see precious metals revalued in the United States and pegged to the currency. We'll talk about that in future weeks, what that means. Jim Rickards' study was 24 to 28,000 per ounce in gold to cover all the debt of the United States. I don't know about silver, we shall see. I think you're going to see an agreement between Russia, China, and the United States, similar to previous agreements between the powers that be on Earth, going back 100 years. I think you're going to see, now that Trump has gotten off, he slapped them with his 100% tariff deal, the BRICS countries, and now suddenly nobody's talking about that. How powerful would it be if the BRICS countries and the United States went together on some gold-backed or asset-backed currency? Think about that. Think about what would happen to trade. Think about what would happen to the United States GDP, and therefore the debt that wasn't extinguished in this revaluation of assets gets paid down by this rapid increase in GDP, along with whatever's going to happen prompted by AI. There's some really interesting things afoot. We're going to get into it in detail in the coming weeks. Because the more I think about this, the more I look at the dots, and I've just given you a few, just a few. One of which is that J.D. Vance told Europe to go get screwed. His speech, it's an amazing speech. His speech is up on the website under Rat-a-tat-tat, International, and under the audio bar. I think we're about to cut Europe loose. Europe has been nothing but a thorn in our side. They are not our allies, they are our adversaries. They would do anything to collapse the United States and boost the Eurodollar and their woke policies and ideologies. And they're led not only by the European Union, but by the monarchs, the monarchy which still exists in London and Britain, which has never been able to let go of Canada and the United States. And while we're thinking about it, folks, let's talk a little bit more about Ukraine and Europe, because it's obvious the Trump administration has cut Europe out of negotiations with Russia. He's going to let them dangle on the wind. And I think that this also goes right back to the tie-in between what is really going on between Russia, China, and the United States behind the scenes at the highest levels. You know, that school teacher that was in a Russian prison for 3 years for smoking dope or whatever they had going there. Trump didn't just send an envoy over there. He didn't send a Learjet. He didn't have the ambassador go over there and pick this guy up and get him back to the United States a week or so ago. No, he sent a 747 with one of his best friends, golf buddies, and confidants, and a fellow billionaire, over to pick this guy up. And they were over there for a couple days. Now, you don't think there wasn't a courier pack with messages to Putin on how to end the Ukraine war? You think he just flew over there to pick up this teacher in the 747, a billionaire, friend of Trump's? You don't think that Trump and his allies know that the Five Eyes, the combined security intelligence forces of the Western world, remember 4 of them are from Europe and therefore really our enemies, not our allies. He had lots of experience with them tapping into his conversations, broadcasting it, leaking it, you name it. I think all communications between Beijing, Washington, and Moscow are all in person or by courier right now. I don't think anybody has a clue, and I think it's by design, and I think it's brilliant. Do I think Trump is serious about Greenland? I think he's deadly serious. Do I think he's serious about Canada? I think he's deadly serious. Not for all the provinces. The province of Ontario and Newfoundland, good luck. But Alberta for the oil, Saskatchewan for the food, the Yukon and the Northwest Territories for rare earth minerals, gold, silver, timber, you name it, and BC for the Pacific ports, which ties into the potential deal perhaps being discussed behind the scenes between Russia, China, and the United States. Yeah, I think there's a lot to see here. There's a lot to ferret out. I'm really interested in your comments. Please post them below or drop us an email. But post the comments on the various sites that we are on that you're listening to us, or unfortunately for you, watching my ugly maw yap. In other words, folks, I want you to start thinking, and I've told you this for years, outside the box. Drop that normalcy bias. Anything is possible, particularly in today's world, in today's rapidly changing domestic and international environments, fiscal, economic, and geopolitical environments, and instability within the, shall we say, global power structure, not to mention the shakeup that's going on in the American power structure right now. Go Doge. Tell me what you think. And I think you will find fascinating the shows I'm going to be bringing you over the next at least 2 and probably 3 or 4 shows as we unravel the really big picture of what's really going on and really possible and potentially highly probable. Much to the benefit, I might add, of a large portion of the globe's population, virtually all of the globe's economies, and to quote-unquote world peace with the globalists thrown out in the cold. That's my thoughts for now. This is Reed Lance Rosenthal on the Right Side Radio and the Cowboys Take, signing off until I talk to you again in a few days. Remember, subscribe, hit the bell, all that kind of good stuff that you do on each of these sites. Pass this link on to other people. Pass links like us, that you like, other shows like us, on to other people. Knowledge is power. The founders knew it. Education is a key to an informed citizenship and to getting this ship righted, under control, steaming in the right direction, and the rats thrown overboard. Keep the wind at your back.
Please remember, if you've missed any shows, just click on Show Archive and you'll find all of his shows. We look forward to seeing you here again next week for another episode of Reed Lance Rosenthal on the Right Side.